Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. We had a couple of technical difficulties, but we worked them out. And I'm so excited to be here today. And today, my guest is the beautiful Casey Johnson-Aksoy. And she is an embodiment coach. She lives in New York. And she works with women on building their self-esteem, confidence, and intuition through deep body connection. And she has an amazing article that I just read from her that was really inspiring to me. And it was all about, what to do when the intimacy goes away in your relationship. And what you can do when you find yourself in a sexless marriage. So I would love it, Casey, if you would just take a few minutes to introduce yourself and kind of what led you on this path of work.
Yeah. Well, I'm Casey Johnson-Aksoy. And I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I am married with two beautiful fur children. We have a dog and a cat. And so I guess what led me to this work was I went through a really deep depression in 2015, and I was fully disconnected from myself, disconnected from my body, disconnected from my sensuality, my sexuality, disconnected from my purpose. And nothing felt good enough. My relationship didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel good enough. I wasn't working at the time. Well, I was working part-time. And my job didn't feel good enough. And so I just sunk into this deep, dark hole. And the turning point for me was when I was on vacation and I was with my husband and my parents. And we were in the southern part of Turkey. And it's beautiful. We're at a 5-star hotel. People waiting on me hand and foot. And I was so sad. I was so depressed. And from that moment, I was I can't live like this anymore. And so what happened in that moment was this deep sense of acceptance where I was in my career, or lack thereof, acceptance where I was with my relationship with my husband, acceptance where I was feeling inside my body. I was I feel numbed out, and I numb myself out even more with alcohol and bad food and just not taking care of myself. Mm-hmm. And with coming to this deep realization, okay, this is what it is. Things started to shift for me, and it didn't happen overnight for sure, and it's definitely still happening. But it definitely, one thing led after another. I started to read Marianne Williamson and Danielle Laporte, and the huge turning point for me was Mama Gina. And I did mastery at the beginning of 2016, and that just opened my entire world of going through the process of reconnecting with myself. From a body standpoint, because I was living here from the head up. And so that was the huge turning point for me to want to reconnect to my body. And then eventually it led me to wanting to do the same for other women.
I love that story. That's so beautiful. And for those of you who don't know who Mama Gina is, she is actually one of the first people that kind of put me on this path as well. So I love that we have that commonality. Mm-hmm. So would you want to explain who she is, just for the people that don't know?
Yeah. Mama Gina teaches the School of Womanly Arts, and she has two particular programs, the mastery course and then creation that follows mastery. And basically she just teaches women to reclaim their lives through pleasure, through desire, and really owning your pussy and allowing it to lead you to your heart's desires.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was it's so, I mean, that's the best I can explain it.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. And I know it's funny because when I first started doing this work years ago, I remember I hated that word, pussy. And now I've wanted to embrace it and actually really love it. And for me, that's my word of choice. But I know that it does take, if it's turning you off at first, or if it makes you like, just know that's okay. Like you can turn around. And I really can empathize with where you were when you were feeling that just low, kind of hitting the bottom, so to speak, and you're in this beautiful place and you're surrounded by luxury and you're waiting on hand and foot, but yet inside you're still just like so sad and disconnected. Yeah. So I think, first of all, I commend you on your journey to be where you are now and to help other women that are, struggling in the same way. So thank you so much for being here and sharing that. And I'd love to talk a little bit more, about what it was like for you when you're in this sexless marriage, and what did you do? Like what kind of things were you able to do for yourself that kind of, made you feel more connected?
Yeah. Well, I feel, well, one of the things, and I feel like I should mention, was I was really afraid to talk about the fact that I was in a sexless marriage. I felt a lot of shame and guilt around it, and I felt like confused by it because, first of all, when you go into marriage, no one tells you like what's involved. It's just like the next thing that you do in your life. You're just like, oh, like I want to find someone that I want to spend the rest of my life with. And but no one tells you that you're going to go through ebbs and flows and like peaks and valleys. And when I started to open up with some of my friends who were married, I found that it was like a common thing, that they weren't having sex in their marriage, or they didn't feel like they had passion in their marriage, or they felt like disconnected from the person that they were, married to. And so first off, talking about it made me feel a lot better about where I was, because it allowed me to realize I wasn't by myself. So when I realized I wasn't by myself, I was like, well, what can I do about it? Like, what can I create within myself that that will make this situation not bearable, but workable? And so I started to really go inward and like focus on my pleasure and, what turned me on. I feel that a lot of the times when you're in a relationship, you depend so much on the other person to like know what you like and like what gets you like hot and bothered and, ready to go. But at the same time, it's like, you don't really know what turns you on. So why would the other person know what turns you on? So I decided to take full responsibility for my pleasure and the path that would lead me down. And a lot of that had to do with creating body positivity and learning to love the skin that I was in. Even if there were things that, like I want to go to the gym and make sure I take care of my body and it looks good and it's tight. But I feel it's important to start where you are, accept where your body is, and start to love it right then and there. Because even if you lost 15 pounds and you don't have that relationship with your body, it still won't be enough. So I started to focus on that, and I started to focus on self-pleasure and like self-pleasuring as often as I could, and like taking my time and not having guilt or shame around my self-pleasuring practice, because I feel there were times where I would want to like just have an orgasm, and I was like, well, I'm not having sex right now with my partner, so how is that a possibility? So I was like, well, I guess I have to take that in my own hands. And then there was guilt and shame around me taking, responsibility for my own orgasmic pleasure. So that was another hurdle I kind of had to work through. But as soon as I started to like really connect with my body, connect to what I liked to be like, how I like to be touched, the setting and the mood of, that I want to experience while I'm self-pleasuring. It really ignited something inside of me and made me want to learn more about myself, not just sexually, but like, what do I really like? What do I really enjoy? Because I realized it wasn't just the sexual part of me that I was out of touch with. It was like all of me. I was out of touch with who I was as a woman and a human being. And so to me, I feel like that's really, really important. It's talking about it with your friends, not being ashamed. And it's also getting to know yourself sexually and getting to know yourself on a deeper level of like, what do you want to create in your life? Yeah.
No, I agree. And I love what you said. You started off with, really accepting where you are and talking about it and feeling okay talking about this. Because so many of us, we don't feel like, we talk about so many things with our girlfriends, but a lot of times we don't really bring this up because it's a very vulnerable subject. And, we can put so much shame around ourselves or beat ourselves up that we're supposed to be in this great relationship, but maybe we're not, the intimacy is not there. And, just with the busyness of life and everything and being disconnected, I love how you, really made it a responsibility, your own responsibility to kind of see what is it within me that needs to be changed, or how can I take responsibility for this?
Yeah.
And I think knowing that you're not alone is huge, because it's like one of the number one Googled searches around relationships, and studies, even the research shows 15% of women, which I know that is not even accurate because that's just people that have actually reported that
right.
to a study. But being able to have those open conversations with your friends is so important. That's what I love that we're able to do here, and just hopefully it inspires other women to be able to feel comfortable speaking up.
Yeah, I definitely feel that was something that really opened my eyes when I started to talk to my girlfriends about it. I was like, oh, you're going through the exact same thing, because when you're in front of your friends and you're with your partner, of course you're like putting your best self forward, right? Like when you're together and you're hanging out with friends, everyone's like, oh, you guys are so like great together. Or you look at like another couple and you're like, oh, they're so wonderful. And like no one wants to talk about like, yeah, well, we really haven't been intimate for a few months, or I don't feel passion for my partner anymore and I don't know what to do about it. I think that's that guilt and shame of feeling those feelings start to fester, and then you start to look for other outlets, whether it's in relationships outside your marriage, or if it's eating, or if it's drinking too much, or the list goes on. And I feel not allowing it to slip into your shadow side and kind of repressing it and trying to forget about it, and just being open and honest and vulnerable, at least with your close friends. That's a start to kind of see what changes you can start to implement within yourself, and then slowly putting those changes into your relationship and how you relate with your partner.
So when you were able to spend more time really on yourself and finding what it is what felt good to you, and, kind of releasing the shame around self-pleasuring so you could get to know your own body and what turns you on, how then did you bring that into your relationship?
Yeah. It was definitely a slow start, because I was changing, and my dear husband, like at the time, I feel like I was feeling so much anger and sadness, and it was all like bubbling out of me, that I was just like, I was not very compassionate or or very like open to how he was feeling. And so I feel like it was me being very defensive and me putting up like walls and being like, I have to be protective of this very vulnerable woman that is emerging because, you know, I want to protect her and I don't want to go back to my old way of being. Like that was really terrifying for me. So I really put up a lot of blocks between he and I. And it was like that for a while. And then one day I had this moment where I was like, well, this isn't fair to him because, you know, he might be going through his own stuff. And for me to project so much onto him is completely unfair. And so I got to a place where I was actually able to apologize to him. I wasn't apologizing for the change that was happening, but I was able to apologize to him for the way that I handled it. And I didn't know any better. Like, I had never gone through this before, and I hadn't met any other woman who had gone through this. And so, you know, I took full responsibility for the way that I reacted to him. And then slowly, I just tried to communicate as much as possible what was going on inside of me, what I was experiencing, and having really honest conversations about our relationship, you know, what was happening in general, and really kind of rebuilding that relationship and that trust between the two of us. And I feel like it's still a process, but at least it's an open conversation, and it's not like it doesn't feel like I have to be so protective of this woman that I'm embracing, and that he can get to know her, even if it's like a slow journey, because he deserves to get to know her. And so I definitely feel it was rocky at first. It was not easy, but the more that I like softened and had like deep compassion for him in the process, and not taking responsibility for his reactions, because, you know, I'm sure my changing caused him to like shift in so many ways. But taking responsibility for my part and my actions and how I could do better as his partner and as his wife, and try to rebuild our foundation. And yeah, it's a process, and I think patience is definitely important.
Yes.
And that's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, I think that is important to point out, because, you know, knowing that it's not overnight, and just giving yourself the time to navigate these issues, and knowing that having that open conversation along the way is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I saw the difference. I saw the difference from when I was being super closed and like defensive, to when I tried to open up more and be honest. And I noticed that he started to get on board with, like, you know, like I was reading like a tantric book, and I'm like, oh, I'm reading this book, and, you know, and he's like started to become curious about the work that I'm doing, or the books that I'm reading, and learning about my body. And one of the things I absolutely love him for is during Mastery, there's a men's day, and I was so nervous to ask him to come, because, I mean, I was like, I don't even know what's going to happen on this day. I have no idea. But he was completely open to coming and like seeing what I've been learning, and so it's, you know, change isn't easy, and shifting your being and your mindset it's a journey in itself. And just because you're on that journey, you can't expect for your partner to hop on that journey right away, because you have to think about how scary and resistant you were at the beginning of that journey. And once I like started to think about the times where I was like, no, I'm not going there, or like, you know, why am I going to Mama Gina? It's probably tenfold for your partner, because it's new, it's different, and you're changing, and that's scary.
Yeah. Having empathy for where they are too, even if there's anger or whatever else surrounding it, just allowing you both to have your experience and not try to control the others.
Exactly.
And I like how you mentioned too that by you doing the work, he is getting curious. A lot of times, I know so many women that will come to me and they'll be really excited to make some changes, but their partner is not open at all or really hesitant. And a lot of time it does come from that place of fear or, you know, being afraid of change. But 9 times out of 10, the more work you do on yourself, the more curious your partner will become, and you know, be more open to what's this new Casey all about her. You know what I mean?
No, completely. I feel, well, the way that I've experienced it is you have like this new, like this wonderful new way of living life. And of course you want to bring that person along with you. And you're like, come on, like, do it. Like, why aren't you getting on board? And I feel like the best way to get the other person curious and just maybe hopefully get on board is to just like be yourself and just show instead of tell what you're experiencing, because showing that person what the changes that you're going through is going to be so much more compelling than you trying to convince them of why they should, you know, go to a workshop on intimacy or like read a book on, you know, the female anatomy and how to like, you know, please and pleasure her. It's, you know, some of the, especially for me, some of the things that I've been reading and practicing can be super out there to a person that is not, the person that is not on the same journey as you. And so, yeah, it's about having empathy of where that person is and accepting it and not allowing it to deter you from your journey. Like, just stay on your path, stay where you're on your journey, and perhaps that person will come around, perhaps they won't, but that shouldn't keep you from, you know, growing and learning and shifting and changing. Yeah. And I feel like for me, there was like a sense of needed to be validated in my journey. And so that's why I needed him to be a part of it so badly, because I needed him to be like, yeah, you're doing the right thing. Like, you should totally like embody your sexuality and your sensuality. I really needed that. And once I realized that he wasn't necessarily going to give me that validation, I realized I had to do that for myself. And once I started to validate my own journey and my own growth, I feel like that's when things started to shift between the two of us. And we were able to talk about like what I've been reading, what I've been practicing, you know, what I've been teaching. And so, yeah.
I love that, because I think a lot of times, sorry, there's some weird feedback here. A lot of times I think that it may seem frivolous, or it may seem like a luxury to explore pleasure or why that's important in your life. But I think it's so much deeper than that, because by doing that, you know, and I love how you talk about this in your article too, but you know, you, by following what you really desire and finding out what gives you pleasure, what turns you on, what brings you joy in your own life, then you will, like you said, you will embody that change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what is the example that will, make the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like with pleasure, like you said, it seems frivolous and it seems like, like, I, I don't know. I had a really hard time with pleasure, like with the concept of pleasure, especially when I was doing the mastery program, because it's all about pleasure, and I was just kind of like, I don't know, like, what do you mean pleasure? Like, I'm supposed to enjoy myself? Like, isn't that a waste of time?
Yeah.
But then
Oh, yes.
I was just literally like, what? Like pleasure? Because to me, I don't know, like pleasure just it seems like a luxury, like it really does. And once I realized that, and I think I mentioned it in the article, where like pleasure can be as simple as like your favorite piece of chocolate, or having a bath, or for me, it's even waking up in the morning and having my cup of coffee. I find just the ritual and the process of making that delicious cup of coffee and then sitting in my bed and drinking it. Oh my gosh, that is so pleasurable to me. And it like completely shifts how I spend my morning and how I see my morning. Because when I don't have that cup of coffee in the morning and I wake up and I automatically like throw on clothes, feed the cat, walk the dog. By the time I get home, I'm like angry. And then I'm like, I have to go to work now. And so it's just the small little things of putting you just connecting with yourself, connecting with your energy, your being, and then I'm able to be like, good morning to my husband and be like, hi, how are you? And like give him a hug and a kiss, and because I've done something to fill my cup. And so I have something to give back when we interact in the morning. And or even coming home from work, I'll walk in the door and sometimes I just take a second to like breathe and collect myself before interacting with my husband, because coming home from a long day after taking the subway and walking home, and you're just hot, especially in the summer. You're hot, you're sweaty, you're tired, you're like angry, and to bring that energy into my apartment and to have to interact like right away with my husband. Of course, there's going to be some kind of friction if I had like I don't feel lovey-dovey. I don't feel like giving away my energy to someone else in that moment. So a lot of times I just take a second and I breathe, say hello to the dog because that's pleasurable to me, like petting her, and then saying hello to my husband and like, finding out how his day was, and then we'll talk about making dinner, and so I'm still working on the coming home part. At the end of the day, my morning is down pat, but it is about finding just those pleasurable moments that fill your cup, that give you energy, so you have like pure loving energy to reflect back to your significant other. I think that's super important.
And I love how you say it doesn't have to be complex. It is those simple little shifts that totally change your mindset and your attitude.
Mm-hmm. Completely, yeah. Because whenever I have some friends who like when they think of pleasure, it's like spending money, like having to go get a massage or a facial or a mani-pedi, which I love all three. But sometimes I feel like people get stuck in this place of where well, I can't have pleasure because I don't have the money to create pleasure in my life. Um, and pleasure does not take money at all. And especially like as far as creating pleasure with your partner, it could be as simple as like, hey, can you like rub my back? And or making a date to, for us it's watching Game of Thrones. And so like making a date to like watch a show together, or sometimes we like to take walks. We like to walk our dog together in the evening, and it's just about creating those small moments that give you really good energy and like fills you up, and does not need to be complicated.
Right. And I think that's so powerful. And I think too, for a lot of couples that maybe they haven't had the intimacy in a while, like jumping back into it, you have to, it does take time because you're just, it's not as comfortable. So starting with those acts of connection to bridge that, to build toward the touch and the intimacy that way.
Yeah, no, because it can be like startling to go from like no intimacy or not having sex into like being intimate with another person.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you've gone through like this journey of growth and change, it's going to take some, you're not the same person. And you have to allow that time for your significant other to get to know who you've become and create a new bond and a new intimacy between the two of you. And it does start with small things like, yeah, like I said, like I love to like getting my back rubbed or just like cuddling on the couch, or holding hands. It's kind of like going back to the basics, you know? But to be honest with you, it's kind of fun. Like going back to the basics is kind of, it's, I don't know, it's kind of like the small moments that you take for granted when you've been with someone for a really long time. Mm-hmm. I've been with my husband for 9 years, and I met him when I was 24. So, and I'm 33 now. And so we've gone through, I mean, he's really seen me become a woman. And so, you know, what I liked at 24 is completely different from what I like now as a 33-year-old woman. And so, just getting back to those small little basics of like, you know, now I don't mind so much like holding hands or a little, you know, PDA or, you know, I can articulate better of how I want to be treated, of, you know, like I want these type of dates, or could you start opening up the door for me, or, you know, things like that, and being really clear and communicating about what makes you feel good and what makes you, what creates attraction for you with your partner. And it, you know, because it's the small things that lead up to having, to reintroducing sex and intimacy back into your relationship. And also it's kind of like, you don't want to go back to having like the same sex life that you had before. Like you want to create something new and refreshing and exciting and passionate, and so yeah, I feel like it has to be like a slow burn into like fiery passion.
Oh, yeah, I love that. A slow burn into fiery passion. Yeah. That sounds delicious. So I love, you know, what you've shared, you know, is really accepting where you are, you know, taking responsibility for your own pleasure and, you know, spending time figuring out what that is to you in small ways and with your body, spending time, you know, self-pleasuring. And you mentioned, you know, kind of getting rid of the shame and guilt around that, both just with your own, you know, with your own self and also with regards to your partner. And I don't know if that's something you'd want to speak to, like what you did to kind of help release that guilt and shame if you care to speak to that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the guilt and shame had been around for a while. Is something that especially around my sexuality and my self-pleasuring. I grew up in a very Christian household, and like sex was discussed, but not that much. And I was a very, looking back, I was a very sexual young girl, and so I feel like a lot of my sexuality I had to hide and like suppress, and so cut to, and like I've always been like monogamous and, you know, one person, one time, all that great stuff. So cut to like meeting my husband when I was 24. It was very much like, okay, I knew right away that I love this person, that I want to be with this person. And so, you know, we had this great connection, and, you know, sex was great. And I never thought about self-pleasuring ever, like after we started dating, and then once we were married, like never. So then when I realized that I had all this pent up like sexual energy and I didn't know what to do with it, and it was starting to die and turn into depression and sadness and anger, I don't know if I realized right away that I needed to do something with it, but I just knew that I needed a release. And so I would self-pleasure, and it wasn't very connected. And it was just more of like, I need to do this to like, to release some energy. Mm-hmm. But then when I really started to do like self-reflection and self-growth and going on that journey, I realized that a lot of that tension was for me having a lot of guilt and shame around my body, around my sexuality, around the around giving pleasure, around my pussy. Like I before Mama Gina, I think I only looked at my pussy when there was something wrong with it. And so it was, I realized how deep that guilt and shame went. It was far beyond the fact that I was, you know, self-pleasuring because I wasn't being intimate with my husband. It had a lot to do with the fact that there was like this deep-seated part of myself that I did not like, and that I was disgusted by it. And so once I started to, like, I was like, okay, what is this really about? Like, what's going on? And really starting to go down the path of like, how can I heal this? I just realized that it was a lot bigger than my relationship with my husband. And then once I really started to really appreciate my pussy and like enjoy self-pleasuring, which I wanted to read more about self-pleasuring. And I couldn't find that much about self-pleasuring. It's always about like you with a partner. And so I read stuff about like me having sex with a partner and kind of tailored it to self-pleasuring, where I really started to enjoy myself, and the guilt and shame slowly started to dissipate, and it didn't feel like it needed to be this marathon thing that I needed to get over with. It became a more like sensual, intimate moment with myself, and you know, I would like candles, and you know, make sure the setting was like romantic because that's what I like. And before I would start self-pleasuring, and then I realized, I'm like, oh, this is not only how I like make love to myself, but this is how I want to be made love to. And so, yeah, it was it was a process. It was a journey for sure.
Well, I think it's interesting because, it is important to understand what our drivers are. If it is, you're just doing it to get to a release or a place of, it can be kind of like another form of numbing versus coming at it from a place of, real curiosity and appreciation and love for yourself. And then the more you connect to that, the more you can, know what you want from your relationship or from your partner, because you've been able to give it to yourself. And part of that too is being, like you said, if there's a part of you that you maybe feel totally disconnected or disgusted by, of course that's going to get in the way of your relationship. And like really getting to the root of that and finding that love for yourself and being able to receive that love from yourself so you can receive it from your partner. Yeah. Then that is a huge journey.
It is. No, and I love that you mentioned that receiving love from your partner, because I don't think that for a really long time that I wasn't receiving love from my husband. And it was very much me trying to figure out, what do I need to do or who do I need to be in order to deserve and be worthy of being loved by this person. And so I got so lost in the doing and trying to be something, that I lost. I feel like I missed out on a lot of opportunities to be more open, to be more self-expressed, to be more loving, and to also to receive from this person. And I feel like I probably missed out on a lot of moments where there was a lot of love and that was being given to me, and there was a lot of understanding, and there was a lot of kindness and compassion, all these things that I thought I didn't have. There are times when I look back and I was like, oh, I had that, and he was giving that to me. I was just too busy trying to prove myself and show my value and my worth, that I completely missed the fact that he was being everything that I wanted in certain moments. And I think going back to when I finally got to a place where I could show him compassion and apologize for how I handled, my the self-discovery portion that he was not participating in, but basically me like kind of locking him out in that process. It made me really realize that I had such a loving person. I was in a relationship with such a loving person, and that a lot of things that I thought he wasn't was just me like projecting my own crap on him.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to say this too. I forgot to mention this earlier, but if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put those in the comments. And thank you so much for watching. Hello, Amy and Jenny. And if, because if we don't get to them now, we will be able to get back to them. We'll get back to you and answer your questions, because I know this is a very important, issue that a lot of women face. And so I appreciate you so much for being here, Casey, and for sharing your journey and all these amazing tips, of what women can do when they find themselves in this situation. And is there any last things you would like to offer for, tips, or maybe your favorite tool that you've found in this journey?
I guess I would just say, just be gentle with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I look back, and because I have moments where I'm like, I'm not where I want to be, or there's still like blocks and bumps in the road when it comes to my marriage and our relationship. And then I have to remind myself of where I was 2 years ago, and what it took for me to get to where I am today. And once I have that moment of realization, I'm like, oh, I should really be gentle and kind to myself, because I've gone through a lot, and I've learned a lot, and I've grown a lot, and I've shifted. So if there's anything I guess like last words, which is be gentle with yourself. Practice self-care. Like even if it's as simple as taking a walk around the block or having a tea with a girlfriend. Like just practice self-care. And also don't be afraid to talk to people that you're close with about what you're going through, because so many women are going through the same thing. And like there's nothing wrong with you. There, you know, don't think that you need to like change yourself to make the situation better. If you're going to go through a journey of self-discovery, make sure that you're doing it because you want to get to know yourself. You want to get to know who you are and what you're capable of. And once you kind of turn inward, everything on the outside will shift. And like I said, it will not happen overnight, but one day you'll look up and you'll be like, oh my gosh, like I'm in such a better place than I was, even a month ago. And also have patience with your significant other, with your partner. It's, it's not easy to watch someone go from someone that they knew to someone who is like almost a complete stranger. And even if it's for the good, it's going to take them some time to appreciate your shift. And so just be patient. And yeah, that's all. That's what I have to give.
Yes, thank you so much, Casey. And then do you have a website yet, or is there a way we can send women to you?
Yeah, so my favorite, I'm still working on my website, but my favorite way of just showing people my journey is actually on my Instagram, because I love Instagram. And my handle is at Feast, FEAST, and Banquet, ANDBANQUET.
Okay, Feast and Banquet.
Yeah.
On Instagram. Okay, I know. Love it. So there's her Instagram. You can follow her there. And yeah, and if you have any questions, please, send them our way. And thank you so much for being here, Casey. It was such a pleasure to have you. And thank you, ladies, so much for watching. And we will see you next week.
Bye.